Today is Monday, March 11th, and let's all wonder about the possibility of the Rangers repeating as champions with the man who's covered them for 27 years.
And now, a word from our title sponsor.
Are all financial advisors fiduciaries? Fewer than you think. Not knowing could reduce your lifestyle. Hi, I'm Mitch Kramer, founder and CEO of Fluent Financial. A fiduciary is a regulatory term to reduce conflicts of interest in wealth management. A fiduciary always works in your best interest. A non-fiduciary advisor might put their compensation or company ahead of yours. At Fluent Financial, we are certified financial planners acting as fiduciary advisors. To learn more, go to fluentfinancial.com or Fluent Financial's YouTube channel.
Introducing Star Power Smart Home Solutions, where cutting-edge technology meets effortless living. Control your entire home with just a tap on your smartphone. Adjust the lights, set the temperature, ensure your home is totally secure, all from the palm of your hand. Experience the ultimate solution in comfort and security for your family. Start by going to the website, GetStarPower.com. That's GetStarPower.com. Evan Grant's been the beat reporter for the Texas Rangers for the Dallas Morning News now for 27 years. Named one of the top 10 beat reporters in the country by the Associated Press. Before the Dallas Morning News, 3.5 years writing for Florida Today after getting his degree in journalism as a Georgia State Panther. And he's our baseball Buddha. Evan, thank you for the time today. We really appreciate it.
Oh, Norm, no problem at all. Good to be with you. It's good to see you, too.
The Rangers, for the first time in their 53-year history, won the World Championship. Did you get a ring?
I will not get a ring at the ceremony on March 30th, but I am really happy that every employee, full and part-time with the Rangers, will get some semblance of a World Championship ring from the organization. I often have to say this to people on the internet, on social media, but no, I don't work for the club. I work for the Morning News, and unless we won some kind of World Championship, that's the only ring that I will get.
What's the biggest hurdle to this team repeating?
Well, listen, I think there are two different hurdles that you have to discuss. One is something that the Rangers can potentially control, and that is the pitching situation. Their starting pitching is not very deep going into the season. They certainly have some very attractive potential reinforcements coming from June through August in Max Scherzer and Tyler Mahle and Jacob deGrom, but the first half of the season, there's not a lot of depth. And in spring training this year, the guys who should be depth options, the young starters, Cole Winn, Owen White, Jack Leiter, Zach Kent, they haven't really showed out. So that's a little bit of a concern for me. Certainly as we record this, Jordan Montgomery is still out there on the free agent market, and there are some other starters out there. And I don't know if the Rangers will at any point in time make a play for one of those guys, but I think that improves their chances of getting off to a good start and getting to the postseason. I think the bigger hurdle comes when we get to the postseason because the added number of rounds of playoffs now make it almost impossible for teams to repeat. The last world champion that we've had that repeated was the Yankees from 98 to 2000. And I just think it's a direct correlation to how many rounds of playoffs have been added.
Evan, before we go to the kid that's attracting a lot of attention in camp, you mentioned the young pitchers on this club. The Rangers starting rotation, Scherzer, Mahle, and deGrom waiting in the wings. The top four are Uvalde, Gray, Dunning, and Haney. And all 7 of those gentlemen were acquired in trade or in free agency. This is a good organization, but why can't it develop pitching?
Well, and the elephant in the room right now is that across the way in camp from the Rangers, Cole Reagans is throwing 99 and 100 miles an hour and getting rave reviews for the Kansas City Royals, and the Rangers traded him for Aroldis Chapman last year. It is a great question, Norm, and I think it is something that the Rangers have struggled to answer really for in their entire existence, with the exception of a very short period in the 80s when they developed Kevin Brown and Bobby Witt and Kenny Rogers, Edwin Correa, Jose Guzman. So they developed a rotation at one point in time, but they haven't since. I think for a long period of time, the ballpark in Arlington, Globe Life, what became Globe Life Park, was a real factor in that. The heat in that place made it really difficult to keep pitchers healthy and strong. The jet stream that existed for a long period of time made it a very pitcher-unfriendly park. But they've moved into a park that's very much more a pitcher-friendly park. The atmosphere is good. This is going to be their 5th year to be in the ballpark, and it is time that the farm system start developing pitching.
The perhaps most watched player in camp right now is Wyatt Langford, their first-round draft choice last year. Last season, once the Rangers got him signed, he just tore through 3 levels of the minor leagues. But one must keep the perspective that a year ago right now, Wyatt Langford was playing for the University of Florida in his senior college season. Is it too much to expect him to jump to the major leagues and play a significant role?
Well, I think that, look, we've seen over the last decade, we've seen a tremendous change in how close to the majors college hitters, particularly SEC and Big 12 hitters are, and Pac-12 hitters for that matter, have been to the major leagues. So I think the time frame in general has been shortened. But yes, this would be extremely short. And I think that what the Rangers will go through as spring progresses is going through this exercise of saying, we can't just be 90% sure that this kid's ready. We've got to be 100% sure. There's no harm in waiting an extra month or 2 months to get him to the big leagues, but there might be if we advance him too early. And so I think that's the question they're going to have. From my perspective, I think the Rangers feel so far he's answered every question along the way in a positive manner that, yes, he's ready. To this extent, too, Norm. He went through first 3 or 4 games in spring training, looked a little bit out of sync. They brought him in, made the most minor of adjustments with his swing, and changed something very quickly. He applied it almost immediately, went out, hit 2 home runs, and maybe kind of set off his teammate, Evan Carter, who 2 days later answered it with 2 home runs of his own. So I think that the initial indications are this kid is ready for kind of an unprecedented challenge, or at least one that hasn't happened in the last 40 years.
Can you tell us why owner Ray Davis, coming off a world championship, decided that this team should at least slightly reduce payroll?
Well, I don't think payroll is reduced. I think that they are at 243 right now, which will be a little bit higher than where they were at the end of last year, and then that gets adjusted as the season goes on for other things. And so I think they're looking at probably closer to 250 when the year is done. I'm not sure I entirely get why Ray has decided to pretty much stay pat, but I think there are some factors. I think one has been the uncertainty over the TV deal. To some extent, that was answered by the agreement that was made between the parent company of Bally Sports Southwest and its creditors that will see the Rangers get about 90 of their $111 million contract for this year. But there's no contract for 25. There's no contract for 26. And if you were to go out and sign a Jordan Montgomery or sign a Blake Snell, you're talking probably about a 3 or 4 year deal. So you've got an awful lot of commitments without necessarily having any assurances on revenues. I think the second part of it is something that we just talked about a minute ago. I think there comes a point in time where this organization has to stop paying retail prices for starting pitchers. It has to develop pitching of its own, or it will create an unsustainable model. I don't know if this year is the time to draw that line, because you've got a world championship team on hand. You've got perhaps the best lineup in the American League, and you've got a manager who's a Hall of Fame manager who is in the second year of a 3-year deal. I don't know if this is the exact right time to do it, but I also understand where the thinking may be that, hey, we've got to develop our own. So I think those are 2 factors involved.
The The Rangers talked Bruce Bochy out of retirement. As you said, he's in the second year of a 3-year contract. Do you get any sense from Bochy of how long he's going to want to continue managing the major leagues?
Well, he's still not the oldest manager in the big leagues, right? Dusty Baker was that guy last year, and Ron Washington, that thankfully is back in managing, and at 72, Wash is the oldest manager in the big leagues. Boch turned 69 in April. I think that I don't think Bruce Bochy wants to go through a rebuild. I don't think he wants to go through a period where he's got an uncompetitive team. So I do think his future with the Rangers will, in some degree, be determined by what kind of roster and what kind of commitment they make to that roster going forward. Look, they're going to have a great lineup. Providing everybody stays healthy, they're going to have a great lineup for several years to come. The question is going to be about pitching and what they develop on the pitching front. And so I think that's going to be a question that we kind of get a better answer on as we go forward this year. I do think he enjoyed being back in the dugout last year. I mean, as we get older, and you can attest to this, and I'm getting to that point, right? It gets harder to move around. And there were times where he looked in pain going to and from the dugout and moving around. But I think in terms of being engaged, Boch is as engaged as he was when he was managing the Giants or the Padres.
And finally, I spent my life in talk radio, and that area changed dramatically over the years. You've been reporting baseball now for more than a quarter of a century. Has access to players changed? Has the ability to develop relationships changed over your quarter of a century plus?
Oh yeah, everything's changed dramatically, and we were seeing it change significantly 5 years ago. But I think the pandemic and the lack of access to players at that point in time that had an impact, as well as the lockout. Listen, and I've talked to our office about this. I think we navigate in a very narrow space now. All the fun and lighthearted and off the field stuff usually is the domain of team social media, and so it's a marketing exercise and not a reporting exercise. We don't get the same kind of access to players where we could sit down away from the field that we used to. Let me just say it's more rare than it used to be. And I think time is more limited, and there are more outlets doing things in real time, whether it's social media or whether it's aggregators. So I think the space in which legacy media, for lack of a better term, local beat writers attached to a credible news organization that vets its sources, that checks facts, it has changed. I don't want to sound bitter. I love what I do. I love going to the ballpark every day. But I do think that we do have to understand a realization that things have changed, and not necessarily for the better. It has been devastating for me to watch the number of journalists across the country who have lost jobs in the last year simply because of cost cutting and because local media is not valued like it once was.
Mm-hmm. I so agree with you. See, we come from different worlds. Your world is shrinking. My world is exploding. And on the opposite side of what's happening in your business, my world's taking in a whole bunch of people who probably shouldn't be there.
Yeah, and this is the thing, right? Everybody's got a podcast, right? We've got a podcast at the Morning News. Kevin Sherrington, David Moore, and I do a podcast. I don't know if we should be on the air anywhere, but we do it. And the issue that I guess everybody on the podcasting side fights at this point is, how do you get your brand out in front of anybody? You obviously have a strong brand. You've done this forever. You've developed relationships. But it is a challenge for everybody. It's a challenge for me in trying to set up a potential Rangers podcast. How do I get it in front of people? How do I get guests? Can I do all of that? So there's challenges on both fronts of the business. Let's just put it that way.
Evan, thank you for your time. I always enjoy crossing paths with you. Enjoy the rest of spring training. I'll see you at the ballpark.
Norm, we look forward to seeing you. You look great. I hope everything's going well, and we do miss you at spring training too.
God bless you, buddy. See you.
Take care.
Today's episode brought to you by Fluent Financial, Retire Sooner, Better Lifestyle, and by Star Power, Love Where You Live.
Just Wondering is a production of DSP Media for FanStream Sports. You can find Norm's show along with other great programming at fanstreamsports.com.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. If you enjoyed it, hit follow. And every weekday, a fresh new episode of Just Wondering will be delivered right to you. And if you enjoy this podcast, please share it with a friend. Finally, should you have questions or comments, please share them with us by going to X and our address at Norm's Clubhouse. That's Just Wondering with Norm Hitzges. And every day, I'll be just wondering about something.